We need to sell her things, Mom. The insurance money is taking too long. My son, Mark, said this while standing in my living room. The air still smelled like funeral lilies and stale coffee. My granddaughter, my sweet Lily, had been gone for only a week. He looked at his watch, not at me. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked, loud in the silence. I held my teacup so tightly my knuckles turned white. The porcelain was cold against my skin. I felt numb. A deep, hollow cold had settled in my bones. The money? I finally whispered. My voice sounded like a stranger's. Yes, the money, he said, his voice impatient. We have bills. The business. You know how it is. He wouldn't say her name. He just gestured vaguely toward the stairs, toward her empty room. He didn't know that I had paid those bills for the last 6 months. I paid for his mortgage in secret so the bank wouldn't take the house. I paid for Lily's braces. I did it quietly, from my social security and my husband's small pension. He just took it. He picked up a cardboard box from the hallway. Here, he said, setting it on the floor with a soft thud. You go through this. I can't. He walked out the door before I could say a word, the screen door slamming behind him. The box sat on my floral rug for a whole day. I just looked at it. The television was on, some game show making noise in the corner, but I didn't hear it. I thought about the day Mark was born. I thought about the day Lily was born. I had poured my entire life into that boy, into that family. I sold my larger house to give them the down payment for theirs. I made them casseroles every Sunday after church. My heart hurt. It was a real pain, like a fist squeezing my chest. Finally, I knelt on the floor. The carpet was soft under my old knees. I opened the box. On top was Lily's favorite stuffed bear, the one I sewed an eye back on last Christmas. Its fur smelled faintly of her, like lavender soap and sunshine. Underneath were her ballet shoes, a stack of drawings, and a small pink notebook with a little gold lock. It wasn't her diary. I had given her a diary for her birthday. It was blue with stars. This was different. I felt a prickle of unease. It looked like a planner, something an adult would use. I picked it up. The lock was flimsy, and it wasn't even closed properly. It fell open in my hands. I felt guilty looking at it. It felt wrong, like I was spying. I put the pink notebook on my kitchen table and tried to busy myself. I washed the few dishes in the sink, the warm water feeling good on my hands. I went to the grocery store. The fluorescent lights of the dairy aisle felt too bright. The squeak of my cart's wheel was the only sound I focused on. Oh, Carol, my neighbor, Doris, said, touching my arm gently. I am so, so sorry for your loss. Her voice was thick with pity. Thank you, Doris, I said. I bought milk, bread, and a small container of cottage cheese. I didn't feel hungry. I felt so alone, like I was watching my own life from very far away. Back home, the house was silent, except for the hum of the old refrigerator. The pink notebook was still on the table, waiting. I couldn't stand it anymore. I sat down and opened it to the first page. The handwriting wasn't Lily's looping cursive. It was my son's sharp, angry script. I turned the pages slowly. My hands trembled. It was full of numbers and dates, names I didn't know. Then I saw a name I did know. Thompson. That was Mark's business rival, the man he blamed for everything, the man the police had questioned for hours. Next to the name were words that made no sense. Pickup point. Transfer. Timing. I felt sick. A cold dread started in my stomach and spread through my whole body. I picked up the phone and dialed Mark. His voice was sharp when he answered. What is it, Mum? I'm busy. Mark, I said, trying to keep my voice even. I found a pink notebook of yours. It was in Lily's box. There was a long pause. What notebook? Just throw it out. It's old business junk. I don't know why it was in there. He sounded angry. He hung up before I could reply. My finger traced his messy handwriting. I turned to the last written page. It was a crude, hand-drawn map of the playground at Willow Creek Park, the place she was taken, and in the corner, a number was circled. $250,000, the exact value of the life insurance policy Mark had taken out on his own daughter. I couldn't breathe. The room felt small, the air thick. I stared at the map, at the number. The pieces clicked into place, one by one, each one a hammer blow to my heart. His desperation for money, his quickness to blame his rival, his coldness. The insurance money is taking too long. The words echoed in my head. He had planned it. My son had planned it all. The grief was still there, a giant hole inside me. But now, something else was there too. Anger. A cold, hard anger I had never felt before. I stood up from the kitchen table. My legs felt steady for the first time in a week. I walked to the pantry, past the jars of peaches I had canned last summer. I opened the old, heavy safe my husband had installed 40 years ago. I placed the pink notebook inside and spun the dial. The click of the lock was loud and final. I felt calm for the first time. I went back to the kitchen and picked up the phone. I knew who I had to call. The name on my husband's old business card was Arthur Davison, attorney at law. The paper was yellowed at the edges. I hadn't called him in years, not since Frank passed. My hand shook as I dialed the number. A calm voice answered. I made an appointment for the next morning. I felt scared. I also felt a little bit of hope, which made me feel guilty. His office was downtown, above the old bakery. It smelled of worn leather and paper, a safe, quiet smell. Mr. Davison was older now, with kind eyes behind thick glasses. He listened without interrupting. I didn't show him the notebook. I just told him my son was in financial trouble and that I was worried about my own security. I told him I had helped Mark buy his house. Let's start there, Carol, he said, his voice gentle. He pushed a piece of paper across his big wooden desk. I'll need you to sign this. It lets me look into the property records for you, quietly. He explained it was the first step. I signed where he showed me. My signature looked shaky, like a stranger's. The next afternoon, Mark showed up without calling. He let himself in with his key. The sound of it in the lock made me jump. He was carrying an empty cardboard box. Mum, I need the rest of Lily's things, he said. He didn't look at me. He was looking around the room, his eyes scanning everything. And that box you were going through, where is it? I put it in the attic. I lied. My heart was beating fast, a frantic bird in my chest. He narrowed his eyes. Why? And what about that pink book? You said you found a pink book. It was just one of Lily's old school things, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I threw it out with the recycling yesterday. I felt terrified. I was lying to my own son. He stood there for a long moment, just staring at me. The grandfather clock ticked loudly. You know, the insurance money is taking a long time, he said, his voice flat. He was repeating himself. He was testing me. He finally turned and walked out, leaving the empty box on my floor. I heard his car engine roar to life and then fade away down the street. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept hearing Mark's voice. The next morning, I drove to the bank. The air conditioning hummed, and the place smelled like clean money. I sat in a hard chair across from a young man in a suit. I told him Mr. Davison had sent me. I explained that I needed to see the original mortgage papers for my son's house. The house I helped him buy. I felt small and foolish. I didn't understand any of this. The young man clicked on his computer for a long time. He printed out a few pages and slid them across the desk. "Here you are, Mrs. Gable," he said. "You were the primary co-signer. In fact, since your husband's passing, the deed lists you as a majority owner." I just stared at the paper. My name was right there, next to Mark's. I owned more of his house than he did. I took the papers home and spread them on my kitchen table. I didn't know what it meant. Not really. But it felt like something. It felt like a stone in my hand when I had been empty-handed before. I went to my husband's old desk and opened the bottom drawer. It was full of files and folders. I started going through them, one by one. I found old bank statements, cancelled checks. I found the check I wrote for the down payment on Mark's house. I found the receipts for the property taxes I had paid for the last 3 years. I found a copy of the loan I took out against my own life insurance to pay for his business startup costs 5 years ago. He had told me he paid it back. He had lied. I felt a quiet strength building inside me. This was not just about anger. This was for Lily. The phone rang and I picked it up. It was my daughter-in-law, Susan. Her voice was thin and shaky. "Carol? I don't know what to do. The bank called. Mark won't talk to me about it." "What did the bank say, Susan?" I asked, keeping my voice soft. I could hear her crying on the other end of the line. The sound was like a tiny crack in my own heart. "They said we're behind on payments, 3 months behind," she whispered. "Mark told me he was handling it. He said the insurance money would be here any day." I felt a deep sorrow for her. She was a victim in this too. She had no idea. "Don't you worry, Susan," I said. "I will look into it. You just focus on taking care of yourself." I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my house. My path was clear. I was protecting my husband's legacy. I was protecting my granddaughter's memory. I was protecting this innocent woman from my son. I walked to the front door to get the mail. Tucked between the grocery store flyers and a letter from my church was a thick envelope. The return address was from the life insurance company. My fingers were stiff as I tore open the envelope from the insurance company. The paper was thick and official. I read the words slowly. The claim for Lily's life insurance was on hold. They needed more information. They were investigating. They called it a standard review process. I knew what that meant. It meant no money for Mark. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I felt a cold relief wash over me. It was a terrible feeling. I folded the letter and put it in my purse. I called Mr. Davison's office and made another appointment. He saw me that afternoon. The air in his office still smelled like old books. I handed him the letter. He read it and nodded slowly. "This is good, Carol," he said, his voice quiet. "This gives us time." He then explained a plan to me, speaking in simple terms I could understand. He drew a little chart on a yellow legal pad. It was about protecting my assets. It was about the house. I felt confused, but I trusted him. He was a good man, like my Frank. He told me what papers I needed to bring him from my husband's old files. He said the first step was to get everything in order. I spent the next 2 days in my dusty attic. The air was thick with the smell of mothballs and thyme. I sneezed as I opened old metal boxes. I found everything Mr. Davison asked for. The deed to my own house, my husband's will, bank statements going back 20 years. I put them all in a neat pile on the dining room table. Mark called on Sunday, right after church. "Mum, did you get a letter from the insurance company?" His voice was tight, like a wire. "Yes, dear. It came a few days ago," I said calmly, looking at the stack of papers. And? What did it say? He demanded. They're holding it up, aren't they? It's that competitor, Thompson. His lawyers are probably interfering. It said they're reviewing it, I told him. I didn't say anything more. I felt him trying to control me, even over the phone. It made me feel small. Well, I need money now, Mom, he snapped. The business is about to go under. Can you help? Just a loan. I'll have to look at my finances, Mark, I said. I'll see what I can do. I hung up the phone. I knew exactly what I was going to do. The next morning, I was back at Mr. Davison's office. The pile of documents sat between us on his big desk. He went through them, one by one, making neat little notes. He had me sign a few papers. One gave him the power to speak for me. Another was for the bank. Now, Carol, he said, leaning forward. This next part will be difficult. Mark is your son. Lily was my granddaughter, I said. My voice didn't waver. I felt a terrible sadness. But I also felt a hard, clear certainty. He nodded. The bank will now recognize you as the primary owner of the property. You have been paying the taxes, and the original loan is tied to your assets. We are going to pay the 3 months of missed mortgage payments to bring it current. He explained that the money would come from my own savings. It was my house to save. He said the next step would be an official letter sent to Mark and Susan. 2 days later, my phone rang so hard it sounded like an alarm. It was Mark. He wasn't asking for money now. He was screaming. "What did you do?" he yelled into the phone. "We got a letter from the bank. It says you're taking over the house. You can't do that." I held the phone a little away from my ear. The azaleas outside my window were bright pink. "I paid the mortgage, Mark," I said. "The bank was going to foreclose." "That was my money coming, the insurance money," he shouted. "You've gone senile. You don't know what you're doing." I felt the old sting of his dismissal, but this time it was different. I know exactly what I'm doing. I didn't die. I just stopped being convenient. I felt a strange, powerful calm settle over me. I felt free. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then he hung up. The click was loud in my quiet kitchen. A moment later, my doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. I looked through the peephole. It was Susan, Mark's wife. Her face was pale and stained with tears. I opened the door. She didn't say hello, just pushed past me into the living room. The scent of her strong perfume filled the air. "Carol, you have to stop this," she pleaded. "Mark is falling apart. We'll be homeless. What are you doing?" "I am securing my investment, Susan," I said, my voice gentle but firm. I made her a cup of tea, my hands steady as I poured the hot water. "That house is in my name. I will not let the bank take it." She just cried into her hands. It hurt me to see her this way. I felt sorry for her, caught in the middle of my son's ugly world. After she left, I sat in my armchair for a long time, watching the sun go down. The shadows grew long in the living room. I thought about Lily. I thought about the pink notebook locked in my safe. Tomorrow, I would call a realtor. I already knew which one. Brenda, from my church choir. Brenda from the church choir met me at a little coffee shop near the town square. She wore a bright pink blazer and smelled faintly of hairspray and peppermint. She slid a glossy folder across the table. The paper was cool and smooth under my fingertips. "So, Carol, I did a quiet market analysis just like you asked," she said, stirring her latte. The tiny spoon clinked against the ceramic mug. "The neighborhood is very desirable. You could list it for a very good price." I looked at the number she had written down. It was more than I ever imagined. "And it would sell quickly," I asked. Like a hot cake at the church bake sale, she said with a smile. Are you thinking of selling? I felt a surge of power, quickly followed by a wave of sadness. I'm just planning for the future, Brenda, I said. It's just smart planning. She patted my hand. You let me know when you're ready to take the next step. As I drove home, her words echoed in my mind. The next step. I knew exactly what it was. Mark came over the next evening. He brought a bouquet of carnations that were already starting to wilt at the edges. The green cellophane crinkled as he set them on my kitchen counter. He was trying to be charming. It was an ugly thing to watch. Mum, I'm sorry I yelled, he said, his voice soft and full of fake regret. I'm just under so much pressure. We're family. We have to help each other. Lily would have wanted us to stick together. I felt sick to my stomach. He was using her memory like a key to get into my bank account. What do you want, Mark? I asked. I need to get a second mortgage on the house to save the business, he said, not meeting my eyes. I just need you to sign some papers at the bank, since your name is on it. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it filled the entire room. His face changed, the fake smile vanishing. No, I will not sign anything. He stared at me, his eyes cold. Fine, he said, his voice low and threatening. I'll just talk to the bank myself. As a co-owner, I have rights. I called Mr. Davison first thing in the morning. I told him what Mark had said. The line was quiet for a moment. I could hear the faint sound of papers shuffling on his desk. He's right, Carol. He does have some rights, Mr. Davison said calmly. Which is why we need to take the next step to protect your position. It's time to send him an official notice. I knew what that meant. I felt a cold dread in my heart, but my voice was steady when I spoke. What kind of notice? A notice of eviction, he said. He explained it was a legal document. It would give Mark and Susan 30 days to leave the property. He said it was the only way to get full control of what was rightfully mine. I feel like a monster, I whispered. You are a property owner protecting your investment from a tenant who has not paid his share, Mr. Davison corrected gently. Are you ready for me to send the letter? I took a deep breath. Yes, I said. Send it. The letter was delivered by a courier 2 days later. I imagined the scene. Mark, angry and shouting. Susan, crying. The explosion came that night. My phone rang, and it was Susan. She wasn't just crying, she was screaming. An eviction notice. Carol, how could you? She sobbed into the phone. We have nowhere to go. You're throwing us out on the street after we just lost our daughter. What kind of grandmother are you? Each word was a small, sharp knife. It hurt. It hurt terribly. Susan, I am very sorry for your pain, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But this is a legal matter now. You and Mark will have to speak to my lawyer. I felt her shock through the phone. She had expected me to fold, to apologize, to fix it. I didn't. I had built a wall of lawyers and legal papers, and I was standing behind it. She hung up without another word. The silence in my house was deafening. The next morning, a shiny black car I had never seen before pulled into my driveway. A man in a dark, expensive suit got out. He walked up to my porch like he owned it. He didn't look like anyone from our small town. I opened the door before he could knock. He smelled of strong cologne that filled my entryway. Mrs. Gable? He asked. He didn't smile. I'm Richard Klein. I represent your son, Mark. He thought I was just a confused old woman. I could see it in his eyes. He sat on my floral sofa and opened his briefcase with a sharp click. My client is prepared to offer you a sum of money to sign over your interest in the house, he said, his voice smooth and cold. Let's resolve this family misunderstanding quickly and quietly. You wouldn't want this to get messy in court, would you? I looked at the number on the paper he pushed toward me. It was an insult. He was trying to scare me. I stood up and took his business card from his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Klein," I said, my voice clear and calm. "My lawyer, Mr. Davison, will be in touch with you." His face tightened. This was not the answer he expected. As he walked back to his car, I saw my son's truck parked down the street, half hidden by a neighbor's oak tree. He was waiting. He had sent a stranger to do his dirty work. I called Mr. Davison the moment the shiny black car turned the corner. I read him the name from the business card. Richard Klein. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Ah, yes," Mr. Davison said, his voice thoughtful. "Klein has a reputation. He's a bulldog. This means Mark is getting desperate, Carol. It also means we're doing everything right." I felt a shiver of fear, but I also felt a strange sense of pride. I was doing something right. "What do we do now?" I asked, looking out the window at the empty space where the car had been. "Nothing," he said. "We let the 30-day eviction notice run its course. We don't respond to their low offer. We wait." Waiting was the hardest part. The house felt too quiet. The ticking of the grandfather clock sounded like a countdown. A few days later, I went to the church potluck. I brought my famous macaroni and cheese, the one with the crispy breadcrumb topping. The fellowship hall smelled of baked ham and coffee. People were kind. They hugged me and told me they were praying for me. Doris, my neighbor, sat with me. "Carol, I heard Mark is having some business trouble," she said, her voice low and full of concern. "Is there anything the church can do to help?" I looked at the faces around me, people I had known for 50 years. They saw me as a grieving grandmother, a poor old widow. They had no idea I was about to evict my own son. I felt like an actress in a play. I was playing a part, and I couldn't tell anyone the truth. "We're managing, Doris," I said, forcing a small smile. "Thank you for your prayers." On my way out, I saw Susan's mother across the room. She was talking to the pastor's wife. She looked at me, and her eyes were full of hate. Then she turned her back. The days crawled by. Mark didn't call. Susan didn't call. Their lawyer didn't call. The silence was heavy. I kept myself busy. I weeded my rose bushes until my back ached. I reorganized my pantry, lining up the cans with the labels facing forward. I tried to read, but I couldn't focus on the words. I felt anxious. Every time the phone rang, my heart jumped. One afternoon, I was watching an old movie on television when I heard a loud banging on my front door. It wasn't a knock, it was a fist. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. It was Mark. His face was red and twisted with anger. "Open this door, Mum!" he yelled. "I know you're in there. We need to talk." I didn't open the door. I just stood there, my hand on the deadbolt, feeling the vibrations of his pounding. He finally gave up and left. I watched his truck speed away, leaving black tire marks on my street. I felt shaky. I went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of chamomile tea. The warm mug felt good in my trembling hands. I had to be smarter. I couldn't just hide in my house. I thought about the pink notebook, locked away in my safe. It was my only real weapon. But if I used it, I would be sending my own son to prison. The thought made me feel cold all over. I felt trapped. There had to be another way. A way to get justice for Lily without destroying everyone else. The next day, I drove to the public library. The air inside was cool and smelled like old paper and lemon polish. I sat at a computer and typed a name into the search bar. Thompson. Mark's business rival, the man he had tried to frame. I started reading every news article I could find about him and his company. I spent hours at the library. I learned that Mr. Thompson was a respected local businessman. He sponsored the Little League team. He had a wife and 2 young sons. The articles about the police questioning him were short. They all said he was cleared of any involvement. He had a solid alibi. I felt a flicker of an idea. It was a risky idea. It was a crazy idea. I found the address for his company headquarters. It was in an industrial park on the other side of town. I wrote it down on a slip of paper from the librarian's desk. I drove home as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I felt a new sense of purpose. It was no longer just about taking back what was mine. It was about making things right. When I got home, there was an official-looking envelope stuck in my door. It wasn't from the post office. It had been delivered by hand. It was from Richard Klein's law office. The envelope from Klein's law office contained a new offer. It was higher than the first one, but still an insult. It also contained a threat. If I didn't accept, they would take me to court. They would claim I was mentally unfit. They would say I was taking advantage of my grieving son. The words were cold and legal, but the message was clear. You are old and confused. We will crush you. I felt a hot flash of anger. They thought I was a weak old woman. They were about to find out how wrong they were. I put the letter in the folder with all my other papers. I did not call Mr. Davison. I knew what I had to do next, and I had to do it alone. The next morning, I put on my good Sunday dress and drove to the industrial park. Thompson Manufacturing was a clean, modern building made of brick and glass. I sat in my car for a long time, watching people come and go. My heart pounded against my ribs. Finally, I got out of the car. My legs felt like jelly. I walked into the cool, quiet lobby. A young woman at a big desk looked up. She smelled like coffee and cinnamon. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice friendly. "I'd like to see Mr. Thompson," I said. My own voice sounded thin. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said. "But please tell him Carol Gable is here. Tell him it's about Mark Gable, and about my granddaughter, Lily." I felt exposed. I was using my granddaughter's name, and it felt both right and terribly wrong. The young woman's eyes widened a little. She picked up her phone and spoke in a low voice. A few minutes later, a tall man with greying hair and a kind face came into the lobby. It was Mr. Thompson. He led me to a conference room. The table was long and polished, and the chairs were soft leather. He brought me a glass of water himself. His hand was steady. "Mrs. Gable," he said, his voice gentle, "I am so deeply sorry for your loss. I can't imagine what you've been through." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," I said. "I'm here because I believe my son, Mark, tried to frame you for what happened to Lily." I felt a strange calm as I said the words out loud. It was the truth. He didn't look surprised. He just looked tired. "The police told me as much," he said. "They said he was pointing the finger at me from the very beginning, but they couldn't find any evidence connecting me to it." "I have the evidence," I said quietly. I didn't tell him what it was. Not yet. I just looked him in the eye. "But I can't go to the police. He is my son." He nodded slowly, understanding. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I told him my plan. My plan was simple. I wanted to sell the house, Mark and Susan's house. But I didn't want to list it with Brenda. I wanted to sell it directly to Mr. Thompson. I told him the price. It was the fair market value Brenda had quoted me, not a penny more. I felt like I was holding my breath. This was a crazy risk. He looked at me for a long time. I could see him thinking. Why me? He finally asked. Because it's justice, I said. My son tried to destroy your name to get money. Instead, the very thing he was counting on will go to you. He will lose his house to the man he tried to ruin. He leaned back in his chair. A small, sad smile touched his lips. Mrs. Gable, he said, you are a remarkable woman. Let me call my lawyer. The last day of the 30-day eviction notice arrived. The morning was quiet. I waited. At 10 o'clock, my doorbell rang. It was Mark and Susan. They were not alone. Their lawyer, Mr. Klein, was with them, holding a briefcase. They had come to negotiate. They thought they were in charge. Mum, Mark said, his voice tight with forced patience. Let's end this foolishness. We have a final offer for you. There's no need for that, I said, opening the door wider. Please come in. My lawyer is already here. Mr. Davison was sitting in my living room, calm as a statue. But he wasn't alone. Sitting next to him on my floral sofa was Mr. Thompson. The look on my son's face when he saw him was a memory I would carry with me forever. His jaw dropped. All the color drained from his face. He looked like he had seen a ghost. The silence in my living room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mark just stared at Mr. Thompson. Susan looked back and forth between them, her face a mask of confusion. The lawyer, Mr. Klein, was the first to recover. He cleared his throat. Mrs. Gable, I'm not sure what kind of game you're playing, he said, his smooth voice a little rough around the edges. It's not a game, I said. My voice was quiet, but everyone heard it. Mr. Thompson is the new owner of the house on Elm Street. I sold it to him this morning. I felt a strange, terrifying calm. I had done it. Susan gasped. Mark took a step forward. You can't do that, he sputtered. I'm a co-owner. It's my house. Mr. Davison spoke for the first time. Actually, Mark, your mother is the majority owner. She has paid the mortgage and taxes for years. The documents are all in order. She has every right to sell. He slid a thin folder across my coffee table. This is a cashier's check for your share of the sale, after the loans you took from your mother have been repaid. Mark didn't even look at the check. His eyes were locked on me. They were full of a rage so pure it was frightening. Why? He whispered. Why would you do this to me? To your own son? I looked at him. I saw the little boy I had raised and the monster he had become. You know why, Mark, I said. I felt a deep, aching sadness. This was my son, and I was destroying him. He knew I was talking about the pink notebook. He knew that I knew everything. He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it. He looked at Mr. Thompson, then back at me. There was no remorse in his eyes, only hatred. He turned and walked out of my house without another word. Mr. Klein, looking flustered, quickly gathered his briefcase and followed him. Susan just stood there, tears streaming down her face. I don't understand, she sobbed. Carol, what's happening? I didn't answer her. I couldn't. After they were all gone, Mr. Thompson turned to me. Are you all right, Carol? He asked, his voice full of concern. I will be, I said. I felt empty, numb. What he did, trying to frame me, that's a crime, he said gently, and what he did to his daughter. You know you can't protect him forever. I know, I said. But for now, this is enough. Mr. Davison packed up his papers. The funds from the sale will be in your account by tomorrow, Carol, he said. You are financially secure, completely independent. I felt no joy, just a quiet finality. After they left, I sat in my armchair for hours. The check for Mark's share of the house was still on the coffee table. I hadn't destroyed him completely. I had left him with something. It was more than he deserved. It was the last thing I would ever give him. The next week was a blur. The news travelled fast in a small town. People at church looked at me with a mixture of pity and curiosity. I heard whispers. She threw her own son out of his house right after he lost his little girl. There must be something wrong with her. It hurt. I felt so alone. I stopped going to the church potlucks. I stayed home and worked in my garden. I pulled weeds with a vengeance, my hands deep in the cool soil. One afternoon, Susan came to my door. She looked thin and tired. "He's gone, Carol," she said, her voice hollow. "Mark. He took the money from the check and he left. I don't know where he is." "I'm sorry, Susan," I said. And I was. "What did he do?" she asked, her eyes searching my face. "You know something. Please just tell me. I need to understand." I looked at my daughter-in-law, a woman I had once loved like my own. I saw her pain, her confusion. She deserved the truth. I made a decision. "Come inside, Susan," I said. I led her to the living room. I went to the pantry and opened the old safe. My hands were steady as I spun the dial. I took out the pink notebook and placed it on the coffee table between us, the same table where Mark's check had been. I felt a sense of release. The secret was too heavy for me to carry alone. "This belonged to your husband," I said. "It was in Lily's box of things. I think you should read it." She looked at the little pink book, her hand trembling as she reached for it. Susan opened the pink notebook. She read for a long time. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock and the rustle of the turning pages. I watched her face change from confusion to disbelief, and then to horror. A low, wounded sound escaped her lips. When she finished, she closed the book gently. She didn't cry. Her eyes were dry and full of a terrible, cold light. He told me the insurance money was for us," she whispered, "for a new start." I felt a deep pity for her. She had been betrayed even more than I had. She stood up. "Carol," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Will you come with me?" "Where are we going, Susan?" I asked. "To the police station," she said. "Lily deserves justice, and I deserve a life without him." We sat together on a hard bench at the police station. It smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. Susan held the pink notebook in her lap. She did all the talking. She told a kind-faced detective everything. When she was done, she handed him the notebook. He took it from her, his expression grim. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The secret was no longer mine to carry. They told us they would issue a warrant for Mark's arrest. They said it might take time to find him. As we left the station, the sun was bright in the sky. Susan put her arm through mine. It was the first time she had touched me in months. "What will you do now?" I asked her. "I don't know," she said. "I have some family in Oregon. Maybe I'll go there. Start over." We stood on the sidewalk for a moment. Then she hugged me, a real, tight hug. "Thank you, Carol," she whispered, "for being strong when I couldn't be." I watched her walk to her car and drive away, until she was just a small dot down the road. A few months passed. I sold my big, empty house. It was full of too many ghosts. I bought a small condominium in a community for seniors. It had a little patio where I could plant my roses. The rooms were bright and sunny. I felt lighter. I was starting over, too. I joined a book club. I started going to water aerobics at the community pool. The women were friendly and funny. They didn't know my story. They just knew me as Carol, the lady who always brought the best lemon bars. One of them was Doris, my old neighbor. She had moved in a year before me. "I'm so glad to see you smiling again, Carol," she said one afternoon as we sat by the pool, the sun warm on our faces. "I'm glad to be smiling, Doris," I said. That evening, I got a call from Mr. Thompson. He told me he had rented the house on Elm Street to a nice young family with 2 children. He said he had set up a scholarship fund in Lily's name with the profits. Life settled into a quiet, peaceful rhythm. I had friends. I had my garden. I had my independence. I thought about Mark sometimes. I wondered where he was. I hoped I would never see him again. The police sent a letter once, saying the search was ongoing. I felt at peace. The anger was gone, replaced by a quiet sadness that I knew would always be a part of me. One day, I was at the grocery store, picking out a ripe cantaloupe. I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Mr. Thompson. He was with his 2 young sons. They were laughing, their cart full of cereal and hot dogs. "Carol," he said, his face breaking into a warm smile. "How wonderful to see you." "It's good to see you too," I said. We chatted for a few minutes about the weather and my new rose bushes. It was normal. It was nice. As he was leaving, he turned back. "By the way," he said, "the first recipient of Lily's scholarship just got into college. She wants to be a dance teacher." A lump formed in my throat. I could only nod. That evening, I sat on my little patio. The air was warm and smelled of roses and damp earth. The sun was setting, a beautiful wash of pink and gold across the sky. I held a warm mug of tea in my hands. I thought about the scholarship, about a young girl getting to live her dream. It wasn't justice, not really. But it was something better. It was a legacy. I felt calm. I felt free. My grief for Lily was a quiet room inside my heart now, a place I could visit. But it was not the whole house anymore. The rest of the house was mine. I had taken it back. I took a sip of my tea. The first star of the evening appeared in the twilight sky. For the first time in a very long time, I felt hopeful.